Howdy, folks. It's David Cobb. I had the honor of serving as the campaign manager for Jill Stein under Jamu Baraka. You are watching the Green News Network. This particular program is called Democracy in Action.
Howdy, folks. It's David.
Today could not better live up to that name. We'll be talking to Chokwe Lumumba, who is running for mayor of Jackson, Mississippi. And as a Southerner myself, to somebody who is coming up out of the South on an unapologetic economic and racial justice campaign in the heart of the old Confederacy makes me hopeful and happy. You know, they say the revolution may not be televised, but I'm going to tell you it will be brought to you over filtered sources of news information. And I encourage you right now, if you like what you're hearing, make sure to share this. Make sure to engage in comments. Melissa Figueroa, our executive producer, is stepping in as technical producer today. She'll be gathering the comments. We will open it up for your direct questions and comments. But in the meantime, Chokwe Lumumba, welcome to Democracy in Action on the Green News Network.
Thank you for having me, and I thank your listening audience for the opportunity to share what we have going on in Jackson, Mississippi.
So before we get into this particular campaign, and by the way, Lumumba for Mayor is the website, so we'll make sure that that gets into the feed and people get a chance to look at it. But Chokwe, before we get into you, candidate for mayor, I want to ask you about yourself.
Absolutely. In fact, I kind of, cringe a little the labeling of a politician, to be honest. But it's a necessary step that we have to take in the movement in which we're pushing, on a larger scale. So my background is one of, I come from a family of organizers. My father was mayor of Jackson, but prior to being mayor of Jackson, he was an activist for many years. He working for the Malcolm X grassroots movement, the New African People's Organization, and my mother was an activist in her own right. And so my parents actually moved my sister and I to Jackson, Mississippi in 1988 because my parents believed that there was work to be done here, not because we had a great aunt or any grandparents in Mississippi, but because there was work that we needed to pick up. And my parents believed that they could not shield us from the movement, that as important part of nurturing us is giving us food and shelter, was giving us a sense of community and understanding and seeing the importance in family, the importance in community, and the importance of seeing the community as a family. And so that is what we find ourselves engaged in at this time as well, is how do we create self-determination for people? How do we give people more control over their destinies, more control over their lives? And so we are embarking on the exercise of using electoral politics as a means, using it as a means to an end and not seeing it as merely the end.
I really appreciate how you frame that electoral politics is a mechanism. It is in my language, we would say it is a front of struggle. It's not the only one. But it is a place where we have to challenge the state, and we're challenging for the state. In other words, not simply resisting it, but actually the audacity to imagine that the government might serve actual people. And that's something, and I'm just going to name it, that in the Democratic Party, the typical Democrat does not think or talk that way, which leads me to this question. You and your colleagues that you rolling with have basically helped to reformulate the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party. Do I have that right?
Yes, I am a card-carrying member of the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party, which got its inception through the work of Fannie Lou Hamer. And it's important that we make that clear. Now, I will not take exclusive credit for the rebuild of the Freedom Democratic Party. But I am a part, and I'd like to make that clarification known that I am a member of the Freedom Democratic Party.
And, and I thank you for lifting up Fannie Lou Hamer. And, for folks who watch me all the time, like I study history as a movement theoretician. Chokwe, I don't read and study history so I can be a good movement Trivial Pursuit player, right?
Yep.
I study history because I think that it will make us more effective. And so I'm going to ask you to go a little bit deeper and give us a short history lesson on who Fannie Lou Hamer is and why the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party is actually not what we typically think about when we say the Democratic Party.
Absolutely. Fannie Lou Hamer is one of the heroines of Mississippi and this country who fought to ensure that there was equal representation in the Democratic Party. Had it not been for the work of Fannie Lou Hamer, then the Democratic makeup would not look as it does today. And so she was instrumental in the fight for ensuring that there was equal representation between women and men and people of diverse racial background. And so Fannie Lou Hamer also was an agent for change in using mechanisms of cooperative models of organizing. And we'll get further into that as we go into our discussion, I would suppose. And so that's also where we find ourselves in a lot of the issues that we're bringing up in this campaign is really imagining what the opportunities are, not just being stuck in the corporate model of how business is done and how jobs are created, but thinking outside of the box of how we pull our resources together to better represent ourselves. And that was her work for the Democratic Party, and that's what must be our work through electoral politics.
And it's interesting too, of course, because we would not do her memory well if we did not make the quote and lift up famously her saying, "I am sick and tired."
Sick and tired of being sick and tired. Yeah.
And what I love about that is because, as a Southerner, it's got the poetry that we Southerners like, right? But it actually, at the root, it is a recognition that we are both powerful enough to change the systems that are attempting to make us disempowered, right? I mean, that phrase to me is poetic, but it's also powerful because it actually suggests that we can do something about it. And I want to actually, again, we are going to get into some of your policies and programs, but I want to really tell us about a little more about both the Malcolm X grassroots movement and Cooperation Jackson, because those were really precursors to the experience of engaging electoral politics in a different kind of way that y'all are doing. And I'd like the viewers to have a little taste of that.
Absolutely. And let me segue into that by completing my thought with regard to Fannie Hamer and sick and tired of being sick and tired, because it speaks poetically not just about the power in which we have and the frustration in what we see, but it speaks directly to the experience of people in Mississippi, and Jackson, Mississippi, to be exact. We've seen different shifts and different people at the helm in terms of the executive office, the national executive office of president. We've seen different shifts in terms of what we consider to be economic booms and busts. But no matter whether we find the country in an economic boom or in a recession, Mississippi still is Mississippi, right? Mississippi is still at the bottom. We don't feel big booms and we don't feel big busts because the conditions have not changed drastically for people in Mississippi. And so until we begin to empower ourselves locally, until people start to see a place like Mississippi as being important to the overall spectrum of oppression and resistance globally, then we will always find a haven for oppressors in a place like Mississippi. And so that's why it's important for people internationally to understand the dynamics of what is taking place. What we seek to do in the Malcolm X grassroots movement, it is actually entitled the Malcolm X Grassroots Movement for Self-Determination and Self-Defense. It's a movement which the premise is to find means by which we empower people to gain more control over their destinies, control over their lives. And the pursuit of electoral politics at this time may seem distant from that overall mission, but I believe that there is a connection. When we're trying to win the hearts and minds of people and show them what these large ideals we're speaking to are, it sometimes requires that we may address what may seem in the grand scheme to be somewhat remedial or less important, like fixing potholes. That's a big issue in Jackson, is our infrastructure. How do we fix the potholes? How do we fix the pipes? And the question was posed to my father, the late Mayor Lumumba. Well, how are you going to bring about self-determination by fixing potholes? And he poetically, suggested that we have to do the job of bridging potholes to potholes and communities to communities, so people in Jackson, Mississippi understand why there might be a community in Detroit, Michigan, or Flint, Michigan, or Gary, Indiana, or Washington, D.C., that suffers from the same infrastructure problems that we see in Jackson. And the reality is neither one of you.
That's the,
yeah.
No, so that's the Malcolm X Grassroots Movement Project for Self-Determination. I do want to also get Cooperation Jackson into that mix, because that's, yeah.
Absolutely, and I'll go into that, but it's bridging the connection so that you see that both of your communities suffer from the same issues, because neither one of you have self-determination. Neither one of you have control over the process which oversees how your community will be repaired, and more important than that, how you will get jobs from it. And that's what cooperation movement is.
And what I want to do also is, for just a moment too, is by the way, Martin DePorres sends you solidarity from Brooklyn. Gary Frazier out of New Jersey says howdy, and he says hey to both me and to you. And Mona de Rivera says, I couldn't disagree more. Good luck to you as an ideology, but honestly, I doubt it will ever succeed. So one of the things that we do is actually take this in coming up. So I do want to actually talk about the fact that whether you use the word self-determination, autonomy, or democracy, it's actually the same thing. Do we collectively have the power to shape the society in which we live? And different communities and different cultures and different traditions may use a different word: self-determination, democracy, autonomy. But it really is just the same thing. And that really is, I want to lift up the success of Cooperation Jackson. I mean, you didn't just decide, hey, I'm ready to run for mayor now. There was a trajectory there that I'd like you to share with the viewers.
Absolutely. This has come from actually decades of work in the community, working to empower and to uplift and to build economically. That's the work of Cooperation Jackson at this time. Is we have the Lumumba Center for Economic Development and Democracy, which is named in honor of my father at this time. Where we're trying to explore means by which we can create cooperative businesses that not only can the people who labor determine what their labor will be, but they get to determine what the fruits of their labor will be. And cooperative businesses which are capable of competing in a market versus capitalist businesses, and utilizing those in order to uplift and build the community, and thinking outside of the box. In Jackson, Mississippi, the dynamics we see is that Jackson is not a city that has a problem with producing wealth. It's a city that has problems maintaining wealth. And a lot of the money that is...
Your wealth is extracted by the rest of the state and the country.
Absolutely. And so we have to take a strategic approach of how we change that dynamic, right? And so it's about, encouraging the employment of people in Jackson through the city and through other means, so that we can build more wealth in the community. But it's also about creating an environment where the businesses that serve this community are also invested in the community. We've seen businesses make a lot of money in Jackson and pick up their bags and leave because they weren't invested, right? And so by creating cooperative businesses which by its very nature, it has a vested interest in the success and the building up of the community, is a very important movement to some extent, and it's maybe has some unique components to this example. We've seen businesses or enterprises that have been taken on by cities. The Green Bay Packers, for instance, is a national football team that is owned by the city of Green Bay. Jackson, Mississippi is a city of about 175,000 people, yet we have no movie theater in the city of Jackson, all right? And my belief is, now we have them in the bedroom communities. That is where all of the wealth seems to run out at 6 p.m. once everyone has left work. So I believe if Green Bay can figure out how to, create a football team, then the people of Jackson can create its need through a cooperative business of a movie theater or other things that we see a need for.
And one of the things that I really want to lift up, and I would encourage folks to go to that website, lumumbaformayor.com, because one of your keystone policy proposals is to generate an incubator fund for creation of new businesses, and you specifically talk about cooperative business models. So can you share why you and the network of folks that you're rolling with, why cooperative business models are so important?
For the very reason that I was articulating a moment ago, is that the understanding that we need businesses to be invested back in the community. We want to invite businesses. We want to express that we are a business-friendly community, and we want businesses to get rich here. However, we want you to invest some of that wealth back into the community. And where we see that is not taking place, where we've seen where businesses have not been vested, we have to reimagine how we make this happen. Quite frankly, and this goes beyond just the question of businesses. This is what this whole the whole purpose behind this campaign becomes, is that as citizens, we have to reimagine how electoral politics works. We can no longer wait for someone to step up and express their political ambitions and tell us all of the wonderful things that they're going to do on our behalf. We have to start driving the agenda ourselves as a community and draft the leadership that supports our agenda, no longer just accepting theirs. And so this cooperative business model is taking the bull by the horn and deciding that we're going to be the solution to our own problems. We're going to begin to rescue ourselves.
So I got to tell you, you're getting a lot of love here. Catherine Anderson says, greetings from Canada, hold strong. Randy Thibault says, agreed, cooperatives are the only way forward. And then Pete Sounds writes in to ask a specific question. How bike friendly is Jackson? And do you have any thoughts around transportation infrastructure?
Absolutely. We have various ideas with regard to transportation infrastructure. However, Jackson is not a bike-friendly city. You don't have bike lanes. Quite frankly, the roads are in such in such a poor state that it's quite honestly not safe to ride bikes in Jackson. We have $1.5 billion to a $2 billion infrastructure problem in Jackson, and so the question becomes, how do we create the mechanisms by which we will fund the work that needs to be done? Now, we have some ideas of how to do that, which takes advantage of some work that my father has initiated. But also, it goes beyond that question of just funding it. Once you do so, how do you find ways to take this crumbling infrastructure and turn it into an economic frontier?
And we're back to the cooperative model of economics, reimagining government, and actually, doing government rather than simply expecting a elected representative to actually do for us. We do for ourselves. And again, the education that I received from the time that I spent at the Lumumba Center, the education that I shared back and forth, and I really appreciated the pedagogical model that folks use there around teaching each other, right? That we are all teachers, we are all learners. It's something that I found a very meaningful one. And I do want to talk about education because I was actually astounded to learn that the school board members in your city are actually not elected.
They're not.
What about it? What's your plan?
Well, ultimately, that is the legislative agenda that we will put forward if we are so fortunate as to be elected, and we're going to claim that. We believe that school board members should be elected because there should be greater accountability from the school board to the school board to the parents. And that is not currently the structure. They are presently appointed by the mayor based on a rotating term of the city council suggestion. So the city council suggests certain members to be placed on the board, and the mayor then makes his decision, and they're confirmed by the city council. We don't believe that that is the best model. Not to say that elections is a foolproof mechanism or model. However, it does allow for more accountability from the school board to the parents. Also, one of these radical revolutionary ideas we have is that we believe that there should be a position created on the school board for a young person, for a student, so they can have a say-so, that they can have a voice in terms of how their education is structured, that it be more student-centered. One thing that I remember my parents telling me when I was making decisions concerning my education is that they offered their suggestion, they offered their counsel, but they told me at the end of the day, it's my life. No one's going to live it but me. And so we have to give our young people a voice at the table.
Chokwe, thank you for that. And I'm especially grateful for your owning the concept of radical. As somebody who studies language, I remind people all the time that all it means is systemic, or to the root, right? Understand the etymology of the word. It just means to the root. So if you want to address root problems, you are a radical, whether you know it or not. I do want to make sure that we get a chance to talk about some of the other policy proposals that you're putting forward. You've got some radical or revolutionary thoughts about crime. I'd love for you to share the Lumumba candidacy and the plan that the entire network that you represent. Talk to us about that policy proposal.
Typically when we address the issue of crime, we limit it to a question of policing, right? What is the balance between quality versus quantity of officers? In Jackson, a common sentiment is the morale of police officers and how that impacts how they do their jobs. And I believe that those are critical questions and you need to address them. However, I do not believe that you can simply out-police crime. I don't believe that the issue of crime is exclusive to the issue of policing. And if you don't create holistic solutions to crime, if you don't address the conditions which lead to crime, then you'll never be able to out-police it. And so crime isn't unique to Jackson. Crime isn't unique to Black people. Wherever you find high poverty, you find high crime. And so if you're not able to address the conditions which lead to it, being able to provide more opportunity, being able to provide jobs, being able to provide outlets for young people to be engaged. I believe that every block will be organized by somebody. It'll either be organized by a positive force or a negative force. And so we want to put funding into engaging our young people and creating programs that capture their attention. We want to see. We want to take advantage of the thing that captures their interest, like music, art, and sports, and utilizing that as a draw in order to engage them and give them some other things that will be more sustainable and beneficial to their lives. And so that is thinking outside of the box. I'm a criminal defense attorney, actually, so I see this issue of crime quite frequently. And people often talk about the impact of education to crime. And that may be so. However, Jackson, uniquely, in one of the positive stats about Jackson, is that Jackson actually has an above average college graduation rate. But we're seeing young people who are leaving school and they're not finding opportunity in their field. And so I'm seeing people come in my office with college degrees just as frequent as individuals who may be high school dropouts. And so we have to create an environment which provides for better opportunity. And we have to engage our young people. One of the common critiques of young people in Jackson, Mississippi, since I was a bit younger, is that there's nothing to do. And so if we aren't able to engage our young people, if we are not the ones who provide them the opportunity, then they will find themselves in less desirable activities. It's a lot easier telling a young person what to do than telling them what not to do. And so we have to fund these programs which will engage them.
So a couple more just shout out because you are getting a lot of respect. So I'll just take a couple. Evo Miller says aloha from Kauai in Hawaii. Suzanne Murphy says best of luck and thanks you for stepping up.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
So again, Chokwe, I want to. We've talked a little bit about your specific proposals. I do want to make sure that we actually put this into some context because I believe that we are living in a revolutionary time, whether we like it or not, because society is going to be restructured because of the use of robotics, technology, automation are basically making the old models obsolete, and will either create a new cooperative model or we'll be heading into fascism. Now, I want to ask straight up, do you think I'm off base? Is this context seem about right to you? And if so, then we can go forward. But I do want to invite you to say, whoa, David, you're being too crazy.
No, David, I think you're right on point. I think you're right on point. And we need to be ahead of that curve. We're seeing big industry decline and fail. And we're seeing the rise of technology, and we need to be able to utilize that technology and being able to use it on a grassroots level. And so one of the initiatives of Cooperation Jackson is to create Jackson, or create the opportunity for Jackson to be a fab city, using fabrication technology that they're using in many other places. And the technology is being advanced where you can create, you can produce for your needs, the needs of the community, and you can produce on a grander scale, on a localized level, in order to produce revenue, to produce profit, where you can just about create anything. This fabrication technology allows you to create everything from furniture to vehicles and homes. And so we need to be able to be ahead of that curve, especially as we're seeing big industry decline and its inability to continue to make the profits of old.
And, it's interesting, Chokwe, I want to share with you, Linda Burton writes in to say, well, if we provided jobs rebuilding our infrastructure, there's plenty of work to do, which and I think, Linda, you're really sort of getting to the heart of the matter for me. You see, I don't cry about technology, quote, taking jobs. I actually think that that's a good thing if we actually harnessed it in a democratic fashion and we were able to actually utilize technology to alleviate the drudgery associated with some type of work. And instead, we were actually empowering ourselves. I'm going to tell you this, Chokwe. My daddy used to say this about money and power and wealth. It's a lot like horse manure. If you pile it up in one spot, it smells like what it really is. But if you spread it around, you can do a lot of good with it. And that's kind of why I think about, it's true of not only money, but of power and decision-making authority. One of the things about the Lumumba for Mayor campaign is its commitment to actually empowering its campaigners as well as the overall city of Jackson. And it's sort of pushing us all to think about electoral politics differently. And I really wanted to lift that up.
Absolutely. I love that analogy. Your father was a very wise man, and hopefully I may be able to utilize that going forward.
Please do. I stuck up your daddy, so please feel free to use mine.
Absolutely. I appreciate the question that the viewer asked in terms of technology, because we cannot make the same mistakes of Detroit, of the auto industry. And so that's why we have to be ahead of the curve. What we saw is as the auto industry went more to robotics, they put profits over people. And instead of doing what the union suggested, giving people shorter work days and paying them the same amount so they could spend more time with their family and at the same time make living wages, the auto industry balked at that and did not want to do so. So we cannot make that mistake. And so what the auto industry failed to realize is they saw their profits decline. They failed to realize that robots don't buy cars. Right. and the people that they laid off were some of the most loyal individuals who purchased the product that they built. And so that's why I'm suggesting that we need to be ahead of the curve so that we can use it for a more communal purpose, right? A more collective purpose than just allowing the technology, ourselves to become slaves to the technology.
So I got to say, Norman Freeman writes in to say, it's good to see a young brother taking the lead to make Jackson a more progressive city. Suzanne Murphy writes in to say, we need to drive the agenda and not wait for permission. We must be the solution and move toward collaborating with key groups. So, we're going to have to wrap up now, Chokwe. This 30 minutes just flew by. I do want to lift up for me and encourage folks, please share this. Let other people know about this amazing campaign. Make sure that folks know about Lumumba for mayor so they can look for themselves to see about the policy proposals on crime, economic development, education, effective governance, and infrastructure projects. So, Chokwe, I'm going to give you the last several minutes to sort of wrap up, make your case, and talk directly to the audience.
Absolutely. Well, once again, David, I appreciate the opportunity. I've enjoyed our discussion. And I encourage your viewers and the listening audience to become engaged in what is taking place. And we want Jackson, Mississippi, to develop not just for the people of this city, but we want this to develop into a model for the rest of the world of what progressive leadership can achieve, and leadership which is centered around the people's voice and the people driving the agenda. And so Mississippi and Jackson is critical not only to this space, but to the rest of the world, because Mississippi for quite some time has served as the symbol of limits of what we can achieve. And so if we can achieve progress right here in the belly of the beast, then it is inspiring for what we can do around the nation. And so I ask people to be engaged. I ask people to ask the critical questions of how we begin to drive the agenda, how we begin to create the change we want to see and draft the leadership which represents our vision for our own lives. And so I thank people. Our primary election is May 2nd. May 2nd. So we could use all of the support in our effort that we need. These campaigns are not free. I would ask people to also just continue to support and promote this campaign so that more people can become informed about it. Once again, visit us at www.lumumbaformayor.com. Lumumba is spelled LUMUMBA, the word for FORMAYOR.com. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
So, folks, you've been listening to Chokwe Lumumba, who is running for mayor of Jackson, Mississippi, on a cooperative model of changing governmental structure. Jeffrey Plugman, I got to say, he says, Jackson, Mississippi, you got to get this man into office. So I'll let Jeffrey have the final word on that one. I do want to thank you, the viewer, for participating in the Green News Network, which is an emerging people's network, so we can talk to each other. I want to thank you for watching this program, which we call Democracy in Action. A reminder to you that every week we talk to progressive leaders and thought leaders who are engaged in making democracy, political, economic democracy actually work. Next week, it's going to be a special 1-hour show where we dive into monetary policy. We'll have a representative from the American Monetary Institute, a representative from Modern Monetary Theory, and a representative from the Public Banking Institute, and we'll find out where there's agreement or disagreement about how to best move forward. I want to end, as I always do, with a big thank you to Milicia Figueroa, executive producer of the Green News Network, Michael O'Neill, the technical producer of the Green News Network, because they are the people providing the labor that actually makes this go. Because what I know is what I know Chokwe knows, and that is that human labor is actually what is going to make this world the peaceful, just, democratic, and ecologically sustainable one that we so desperately need. Peace. Bye now.